Well, hello, everybody. So we are actually going to talk about the past two Secretariat calls because they are somewhat related. So the one that was on March 9th talked about CQI and then led into diversity 3.3, of which if you were on that call, you know there was tons and tons of questions and they were trying to address it. And then April's, which was just yesterday, actually. Well, I guess depends on when you're watching this. It probably wasn't yesterday for you. But April Secretariat call was about, they titled it LCME Process Change. Very fascinating. But there was a lot of discussion, again, about diversity because of what is going on and then some other things. So we thought this one would be a good one to kind of combine. And let's just face it, we were behind anyway. So it worked out really well for us. Thank you, LCME Secretariat calls. Okay, so let's start with diversity. I'm going to just start it off because I am in a state where I'm one of those states where there's a lot going on with the state legislature. Actually today, this day that we're actually taping it, the legislature is going to decide some, what is to me personally, very disturbing things that we might have to take out, remove all DEI from our website, from our titles, that we would not be able to track by, race and ethnicity and those sorts of things. And so we only got 5 citations, but one of our citations was on 3.3, of course, and it was on senior administrative staff Hispanic, because Hispanic is one of our categories. So we would not be able to track that any longer. And I'm 99.9% sure that's what's going to happen with the state. So one of the things that they've talked about, what I want us to talk about, is they said, well, you can come up with new categories, right? So we have a task force that's going to be happening, and we're going to be talking about that. But for me, yes, we can totally do that. But there's limited other categories that you can do. Like, honestly, if you're in one of these states, or depending on what happens with the Supreme Court decisions. And in some ways, I do feel like we're just, playing around this. And if we just didn't have diversity categories at all, we could actually probably recruit more diverse candidates if we weren't pigeonholed into things. But that's been an opinion I've always had. So I don't know. What do you guys think?
Actually, that pigeonhole feeling is a bit of how I felt at my last institution when we were cited for 3.3, and this was back in 2017. And even there, I just felt we were so slighted because we had to have focused efforts just on like 2 categories for retention and recruitment. And then it seemed like you forgot about everything else. Even though we didn't, it's just on paper, how you were selling yourself as a school, how you were recruiting people. It still just looked very limited. So I agree with you. I've not really seen that this has done anything to improve the diversity at our schools. So as stressful as this is right now, it'll be very interesting to see kind of how the landscape changes over the next several months and years.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. I don't even know what categories we could use. I think keeping it for students would be good, and using more like, the different categories that aren't related to, ethnicity. But the faculty and the senior administrative staff, I don't know. I just feel like if they just remove that component of the element, then it would be a lot easier on the schools. When they showed the trend data yesterday about all the elements, the one thing that all schools are getting cited on is 3.3. So why don't they make it so that it's easier for the schools to be successful in being compliant with that element?
Right.
Yeah. And what's interesting, Jenny, you even said, it's the new changes coming out to say, like, we can't track it. But having worked at a state university, we were told by our HR department that we're not allowed to track it. So it had to be voluntarily reported information. So then you had to figure out a mechanism to put into place to collect that information about your faculty and your senior administrative staff. To Lisa's point, it was a lot easier to do it from the student side because we have AMCAS data and the admissions process. But the employee data was a bit contentious, even before all of the rumblings that are going on right now.
Right. And it's not complete data because it's only people who want to disclose. So we're not even giving the full picture when we do give the data.
100%. I think it would be much better if, you know, if schools just had to show what they were doing for diversity in general, right? And maybe there was a few guidelines around that, and then they could just show and then show their results, whatever that means to, you know, whatever they're doing. I think that would be much better. One of the things they suggested, you know, because people were saying, well, what are we going to do? And so I think Ronnie said, well, you know, you could have socioeconomic status, and then, you know, like something like first generation,
Rural.
okay, and then rural, but not everybody's going to be able to do rural, you know, like that's
Right.
right, you know, it's going to be a, you know, but yes, that one. So it's just, so now the entire country potentially, depending on what happens with SCOTUS, is going to all do, you know, first gen and socioeconomic status. A few will do rural, a few might do military. That becomes just utterly
Limiting.
pointless. It's ridiculous. And again, to be clear, I'm a full proponent of diversity. We talk about how and truly, honest to goodness, we believe in all kinds of diversity. So not just gender or racial or ethnic, but diversity of like your age. Like we want people, we want some older, you know, students in the class, some younger, you know, students in the class from different majors, right? Like all kinds of like really diversity of thought. So a huge proponent of diversity. I just think we're being, again, just pigeonholed, and it's just at some point this just becomes a silly exercise, rather than being what could be super meaningful, at least to me.
Sorry,
Yeah,
my
and
dog's barking.
Oh, and I agree with, I didn't say eliminate faculty.
Yeah.
It's the tracking.
Right,
You know,
right.
definitely have programs in place and the recruitment and retention, but this whole tracking and just having people stressing over these tables and collecting the data. I mean, so many resources are being used in trying to figure out the right way to get the information so that we're compliant instead of just doing what is right for the school.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the only thing that I heard that makes me feel a teeny bit better, and this was on the April call, not on the March call, was that I think that I'm betting they got a lot of blowback after that call. and as they continue to watch the political landscape, I did feel like there was a, you know, okay, we're creating a ad hoc group to look at this. We're going to have to consider things in this landscape. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think the one problem with that is that we're gonna switch gears and talk about some of the other things they said, but that, you know, it takes years for them to change DCI, right? Which was ridiculous to me, but so that's not going to help schools like in the next like 3 to however many years, right? Although they did say if in your state you have to change because you are not allowed to anymore, you know, write that out and everything. But so maybe you won't get a U, but what are you gonna get? Monitoring for the rest of your life. Yeah. So
Status reports.
yeah, so we love them. Okay. Hey, they keep us busy and in jobs. All right. So there you go.
Yeah. Job security.
Job
Yeah.
security. We got it.
You know, and the new DCI just came out with a bunch of little nuanced changes that we're not going to talk about right now. But
Nope.
yes,
But
I
that
just
would
kept
be-
saying job security.
Yes, that would be, I'll drink to that. All right, perfect. It's just coffee. Okay. But all right, well, let's talk about some of the other things they talked about on the April call besides diversity. Who wants
Well,
to
you know what I
open?
thought I'd share was
Sure.
the tables, the data. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Mhm.
As far as, can you see that?
Yep. Data
Okay.
across the pandemic era.
Yeah. So what I found interesting is the number of citations going up significantly. And
Yeah.
I'm wondering what your thoughts on why that is.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it again, I think it was, you know, and they even talked about some of this. I think it was really hard to keep students happy during the pandemic, understandably so. I think there was a lot of things that they couldn't necessarily give a satisfactory to, like they said, I mean, what they should have done is like eliminate some of the questions or elements that can't be evaluated, right? Rather than give a CM or a U. So students weren't in libraries and study spaces because they were shut down. So why would you ask that question? What type of, I'm sorry, but what type of idiots would ask a question that is invalid? How about NAs? What if we have an NA for that? I mean, so I think part of it was the fact that there was literally things that were NA during that period, but you can't take them out because that would be using logic, and God forbid we have logic involved in this. So that's one thing. I don't feel so strongly about that too. Okay. Yeah. Well,
Yeah, and the increase in the unsatisfactory versus satisfactory with monitoring is also a little alarming as well.
Yeah. And I think that plays in a little bit, to the student satisfaction issue.
Yeah.
So shall we talk about what they said about student satisfaction? Let's look at this. Yeah. It's frequently cited elements.
And there's your 3.3 over and over again.
Yeah.
3.3. The one that,
yeah, I mean, and just look at that. 5 point, isn't 5, what is 5.11? Isn't that space? I can't remember.
Yes.
Yeah. So
one
again,
of the spaces.
Pandemic, and you're asking about space. I mean, seriously, use your brains, people. Like, oh my God. I like to try to be respectful and say that I support, because I do think it does really good things for education. But then I see something like that where it's just like, seriously, like, use your brains. Like, my God.
all right, I'll stop sharing that.
What's
I don't want to get you
12.1?
too frustrated.
Yeah, I know. Like now I just want to
mean,
now I want to put something else in this drink.
But it is career counseling, academic advising, the same things that are,
Yeah.
you can see
And a lot of those things are satisfaction scored, right?
Yes, exactly.
12.1 is, satisfaction with the financial aid services, debt management counseling.
Yeah.
7.1 probably is the only one that's the tables of what is taught, like pre-curriculum stuff. And so I'm wondering why that's always being cited. I think we were okay on that one. So
yeah, we were okay too. I don't know.
But that maybe that is student satisfaction as well. There's
I think it is. And
you're right. There is how prepared are you to,
and it's interesting because so two of the schools I've been at, schools I've worked with, consulting, it is really more of the pre-clerkship, those kind of basic science domains that the numbers, are down for GQ data, really, when the students reflect back on, how did this basic science content area, domain area really prepare you for clinical? And I think schools are probably rightfully so seeing a like a downturn in that, because a lot of schools are still going through like a first pass curriculum reform, or they are in the process of some kind of curriculum renewal. And so much emphasis is being on like how much depth do we need to teach in those areas too? So, to Jenny's point, I'm definitely not against the LCME. I do think there is a lot.
Not at all. We're not.
No, not at all.
We're not against it.
We're just not trying to be super critical, but critique some of the areas. But this is a good area where I think if we are doing really good CQI as we're supposed to do, we can make improvements to those areas and make sure we are teaching what is necessary for the students and not some, minutia that's not really helpful for them, because we're not creating basic scientists, we're not creating biochemists and molecular biologists. We're creating the undifferentiated MD to go into residency.
Yeah, no, 100%. I did think one potentially moving towards a positive direction sign was them talking about specifically some of these elements where student satisfaction can sink you. They basically said like they're exploring what are some other documentation you can provide that would, and I think they actually used the word counter the student satisfaction data, because I know they're getting pummeled on that, and as well they should, because again, if you look at medical education as a science, which it is, there's all kinds of papers and data on satisfaction and how much that should matter and what that means. And is it a piece of it? Of course it's a piece of it. Is it the entire thing that you should get a U for? No. So I was happy to see that. But also a little frustrated with them saying kind of how long it would take potentially to be making changes based on that. But I did
talk
feel
about-
at least like they're being heard. Yeah.
Yeah, and they did talk about the concept of the 360 evaluation, so not using just the student evaluations, but thinking of other ways you can pull information in,
Yeah.
or information from other elements as well to put into your responses to make
Yeah.
them stronger. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's another way to think about, framing your response when you're completing the time.
Right. So that was a sign that was to me a little hopeful. And I guess the most reassuring thing about it was that they're hearing, right? They've heard the complaints in the literature and all of that. So that's a good sign. So
Yeah.
yep.
And on a positive.
Yes. There we
sign.
go. Yes. Anything else? All right. Well, if you've gotten this far, we'll just remind you that this is Christner Strategies, and we help schools make accreditation fun. That's right. We said fun. We've helped a lot of schools. We've helped a new school get preliminary accreditation. Woot, woot. We're helping 2 schools right now with their self-study. Woot, woot. We're providing maintenance so that you don't get into problems for several schools. So, hey, if you need us, give us a call. Maybe we'll invite you to be on our podcast. You never know. Okay, podcast, YouTube, it's all the same these days. All right. Until next month, when we debrief whatever else the LCME Secretariat does or doesn't do, as the case may be. Okay, but we love you. We love you, LCME. What is it? Yay. Okay, everybody do your heart. Colleen, heart. Okay, let's go. All right, there we go.
I feel like you're pushing it a little, but that's okay. I did it.
Okay.
I did it.
Are you sure something isn't in that coffee?
There is nothing. I'm just saying we're taping on a Friday, people. We're taping
There we
on
go.
a Friday.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
That's right.
All right.
That's right.
Signing off until next month.
All right.
Bye.
Let me stop.